There are people who walk through life asleep. They follow the noise, the routine, the script. They don't question, they don't notice, they don't feel too much. And then there's you. You notice things, the shift in someone's tone, the sadness behind a smile, the tension in a room when no one says a word. You pick up the patterns, the inconsistencies, the quiet truths others try to hide. You see too much, not because you're looking for it, but because you can't unsee what you feel. It's not always a gift. Sometimes it's a burden, because while others float through the surface of things, you drown in the depth. You question the meaning, the motive, the why behind every word. You feel when people lie, even if their lips never say it. You sense what's unspoken, and it lingers in your body like a truth you were never meant to carry. You've been told you're too intense, too sensitive, too much. But what they really mean is, you make me uncomfortable because you see me. And being seen terrifies those who are hiding. You weren't born to be surface level. You weren't built for shallow waters. You are the diver, the deep seer, the one who holds the mirror. But mirrors are threatening. Not everyone wants to be reflected. Not everyone wants to face the parts of themselves they buried. So they turn away from you. They label you. They call you dramatic, overthinking, cold. Not because you are, but because you make them feel exposed. You challenge the illusion. You disrupt the comfort. You force questions where they only wanted silence. And in return, you're left out, misunderstood, alone. But don't mistake that for brokenness. It's not your flaw, it's your depth. You were born with eyes that don't look, they pierce. And the world fears what it can't control. That's why they push you away, because they can't handle the light you bring. Not when they've spent years living in shadows. But here's the truth they'll never say. They need you, even when they resent you, even when they dismiss you. Because it's people like you who wake the world up, slowly, painfully, honestly. You're the one who asks the hard questions, who names the things no one wants to speak, who says, "This isn't real," when everyone else is pretending. And yes, it costs you. Relationships, opportunities, peace. But what it gives you is something few ever taste. Clarity. You see the game, the roles, the quiet desperation behind perfection. And though it isolates you, it also frees you. Because the moment you realize you were never meant to fit in, you stop shrinking to be palatable. You stop editing your perception to make others feel safe. You stop apologizing for having eyes that see truth instead of illusion. And in that space, you begin to reclaim your power, not by fixing yourself, but by honoring your vision. They call it intuition, but for you, it's not mystical. It's visceral. It lives in your body, a knowing without proof, a certainty that lands before the facts ever do. You walk into a room and feel what others miss, the heaviness in the air, the way someone's words don't match their energy, the tension no one names, but you feel it like thunder behind glass. You've always been this way. As a child, you noticed what was unsaid, the sadness your parents carried, the tension between their words, the moments when love turned quiet, but never disappeared. You watched, listened, absorbed, and somewhere along the way, you learned something dangerous, that truth is not always welcomed, that honesty can break the room, that people say they want to be seen, but recoil when you do. So you adapted. You smiled when you knew something was wrong. You held back your knowing. You played normal to avoid rejection. But it never felt right. Because the deeper truth never stopped calling, and you couldn't stop hearing it. You don't see the world like others do. You see beneath it. You see the patterns of pain, the scripts people live by, the shadows they pretend aren't there. And sometimes you try to help. You try to speak what you see. You offer a mirror, gently, truthfully. But most aren't ready, because being seen means being held accountable. It means facing the parts of themselves they've spent years denying. So instead of listening, they defend, they reject, they label you. Too intense, overanalyzing, too deep. But what they really mean is, you won't let me hide, and that scares me. So you stop sharing, you retreat. You learn that silence feels safer than honesty. But deep inside it hurts, because all you ever wanted was to connect, truly, fully, beyond the mask. You're not trying to control people. You're trying to love them with your full self. But your full self sees too much, and that becomes a threat. But what if that's not the problem? What if your perception isn't a burden, but a form of leadership? What if your depth is what the shallow world needs most? Not everyone can hold your vision. Not everyone can stand your mirror. But some can, and they will. And when they do, it will feel like coming home. Because your clarity deserves to be met by someone who doesn't flinch when you speak truth. By people who crave depth, not distraction. You don't have to dilute yourself to be understood. You don't have to dull your insight to feel safe. You don't have to see less, just because they refuse to see more. Your eyes are a gift. Don't shut them just to keep others comfortable. You've probably asked yourself, why can't I just let things go like everyone else? Why can't you smile through dishonesty? Why does manipulation feel like poison on your skin? Why does fakeness make your stomach turn? Because you were never built for the surface. You were built to notice, to question, to awaken. And awakeners don't get applause. They get resistance. They get silence. They get pushed away. Because what you see, others are trying to forget. And your presence, it reminds them of their compromises, of their lies, of everything they abandoned just to be accepted. You're not cruel, you're clear. But to someone who's hiding, clarity can feel like cruelty. So they avoid you, or worse, they try to change you. Lighten up. Stop reading too much into it. Not everything is that deep. But for you, it is. Everything holds meaning. Every silence, every contradiction, every half-truth spoken like a fact. You don't want drama. You want real. But most people don't know how to live there. They've built identities on what sounds good, not what feels true. So when you show up with your honesty, your emotional precision, your refusal to play along, you shake the foundation. And people defend their foundations at all costs, even if it means losing you. So you learn to walk alone, not out of pride, but protection, because you'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded in illusion. But it still hurts, because even the strongest souls crave connection, and the deepest seers still need to be seen. So you question, am I the problem? You're not. You're the contrast. You reflect what's missing, and that's uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because a world built on pretending needs truth tellers, needs mirror holders, needs people like you. But you can't spend your life begging to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. That's not your path. That's not your purpose. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to call things out, not with anger, but with presence, not to destroy, but to wake. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's tempting to numb your knowing just to belong. But don't shrink your sight. Don't mute your voice. Don't pretend you don't feel what you feel, because your clarity isn't just for you. It's for the world that forgot how to feel, that forgot how to see, and maybe, just maybe, you're here to remind it. If this feels like your truth, you're not the only one. Subscribe, not to be fixed, but to remember who you are. Depthora, where deep isn't dangerous, it's home. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he didn't say is how lonely that privilege can feel, because becoming your true self requires seeing all the ways you were shaped to be something else. And you saw it early. You noticed the masks, the performance, the roles people play, not because they want to, but because they're afraid not to. You felt the disconnect between who people are and who they pretend to be, and you asked the questions no one was ready for. Why do we act happy when we're not? Why does telling the truth make people uncomfortable? Why do we celebrate perfection but punish authenticity? The moment you began asking, you stepped outside the script, and once you step out, you can't go back. Because seeing through the illusion breaks the illusion. It's not glamorous. It doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels like exile. You're not just different, you're disconnected from the world you once belonged to, from the roles you once played, from the people who once smiled, but never really saw you. And that ache, that's the price of clarity. Jung called it individuation, the process of separating from the collective to find your own self. It sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice, it feels like death. The death of your persona, the one you wore for safety, the one that got you approval, the one that made you feel loved, even if it wasn't really you. Letting it go means losing the version of yourself the world accepted, and standing there with nothing but your raw truth and your unmasked eyes feels unbearable. But it's not. It's the beginning. Because what you lose in comfort, you gain in freedom. The freedom to feel fully, to love deeply, to create honestly, to live awake. Most people sleep through life because they're terrified of what they'll see when they wake up. But not you. You woke up early, not by choice, but by design. You were made to see, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. You are the disruption in a world that avoids discomfort. You are the mirror in a culture addicted to illusion. You weren't meant to fix everyone, or to be understood by many. You were meant to embody truth, even when it costs you comfort. And yes, it's heavy, but it's also sacred, because every time you choose honesty over silence, you light a path for someone else to follow. Not everyone will, but some will. And those people, they'll meet you not at the surface, but in the deep, where nothing is perfect, but everything is real. You don't want to be better than anyone. You just want to be real. But in a world that rewards masks, realness feels like rebellion. They tell you to calm down when all you did was tell the truth. They call you distant when you're just protecting your peace. They call you arrogant because you refuse to perform, but you're not cold. You're clear. And clarity, in a culture that feeds on confusion, is threatening. Because when you see through manipulation, you stop playing along. When you see through fear, you stop obeying it. When you see through the noise, you stop needing approval. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you hurt people, but because you can't be controlled. And people don't know what to do with someone who isn't seeking permission. So they call you names, project their fear onto you. try to pull you back into the fog they never left. But you've already left. You've already tasted what it means to feel aligned with your inner world, even when the outer world resists it. You've felt the silence of solitude, not as punishment, but as a place where your truth echoes louder. And in that silence, you've rebuilt, piece by piece, wound by wound, not to become perfect, but to become whole. You've learned that solitude isn't loneliness, it's sovereignty, and sovereignty is magnetic. Because once you stop chasing validation, you become rooted. And rooted people don't sway with opinion. They don't compromise for comfort. They don't trade self-respect for momentary affection. And yes, it makes you harder to reach, but it also makes you impossible to fake. Only those who resonate with truth will find you, and when they do, they'll stay, because they won't want your mask. They'll want your essence. They'll meet you with depth, with presence, with silence that heals instead of silence that hides. And that kind of connection, that rare, sacred meeting, is worth every moment you spent misunderstood. So stop asking if you're too much. Stop apologizing for your knowing. Stop wondering if life would be easier if you were less aware. Yes, it might be easier, but it wouldn't be real. And you were never meant for easy. You were meant for truth. And truth has always been yours to carry. Not because you asked for it, but because you were strong enough to hold it. You were never meant to be invisible. You were just born into a world that fears what it can't numb. They told you your intensity was too much, that your honesty made things awkward, that your depth was a problem to fix. But they were wrong. Your depth is not a flaw, it's your fingerprint. It's the evidence that you were built for something more than surface-level survival. You see too much because you were made to. You feel too deeply because shallow doesn't satisfy you. You speak truth not because it's easy, but because silence would betray who you are. So here you are, still standing, still seeing, still speaking, despite the rejection, despite the loneliness, despite the endless pull to shut it all down and just be normal. But normal was never your home. Truth was. And the truth is this: you don't have to shrink to be safe. You don't have to hide to be loved. You don't have to apologize for how deeply you feel. You are not too much. You are precise. You are aware. You are awake in a world still dreaming. And your presence is the alarm, the soft disruption, the gentle earthquake, the mirror people didn't ask for, but needed all along. You will never be understood by everyone. You will never fit into spaces that reward conformity over consciousness. But that's not a curse. It's clarity. Clarity that lets you stop performing. Clarity that lets you love without pretending. Clarity that lets you finally breathe without guilt. Because you've always known there's more. More to feel, more to know, more to become. And that more has always been inside you, waiting, watching, waking. So take this moment as proof. You're not broken. You're not dramatic. You're not wrong for seeing what others don't. You're just early. You're just deep. You're just you. And maybe that's not the easiest path, but it's the most honest one. And honest paths always lead home.